Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Recharge Zone podcast. I'm your host, Brent Doty, joined by my co-host, Ann-Margaret. Hi, Ann-Margaret.
Hi.
And today we have an exciting episode. We are joined here by our General Manager, Roland Ruiz. Hi, Roland.
Hey, good to be with y'all.
Executive Director, Michael De La Garza of the Communications Team.
Good afternoon, folks.
And Ed Flores, our Creative Manager. Hi, Ed.
Glad to be here.
All right, so today we have a special topic. We are talking about it's about logos and about brands. So the EAA has its own brand, its own logo, and we're talking about the evolution of that over time.
So let's start with you, Roland. Can you provide the foundation of how we arrived at our current logo brand over the past 28 years and how it's evolved to what the logo currently is to this day?
Sure. If you go back and look at the history of the EAA, a lot of our history, I'll use the word iterative. It was an iterative process of how we had the mission given to us through our the statute that mandates what we're supposed to do. And we arrived in the early days with the three words: manage, enhance, and protect, to capture the mission in a concise way. So we manage, we regulate the use of the Edwards. We enhance by trying to improve its recharge, protect its recharge, enhancing the understanding about the aquifer. And we protect it by certain rules and regulations that limit what you can do, for example, in the recharge zone. And we try to make sure that wells are constructed properly, and when they're closed, they're done properly to prevent pollution. So those being the kind of the three prongs of the mission. In the early days, I think what happened was the EAA was born out of that legislative mandate. And I wasn't here, but I suspect that at the time they came up with something to just identify the EAA as what it is. And so we had our original logo, which was really a simple drop with a ripple of water that signified water. And that's what the Edwards was about. Now, over time, as the agency grew, it also grew in its sophistication in many respects across the board, one of them being in how we communicate what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. And so you fast forward from 1996 to around 2011, 2012, we started a different era, if you will, in the life of this organization. We started focusing on the development of an Edwards Aquifer Habitat Conservation Plan. The effort was to get an incidental take permit for the use of the Edwards to protect the region from any future litigation. We were born out of litigation. We didn't want to go back there again. And so that's where we were at the time. And with that, there was an effort to really rethink what the mission was and how we communicated the mission to the public, because an HCP puts you on a higher profile. It puts you in the face of a number of different kinds of stakeholders, not just the regulated community that we were used to dealing with, the permit holders, but now we're working with entities in the eastern part of our region, downstream interest, people to the west, all had to come together to get to an HCP that everybody could agree to and get approved by the federal government, by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. In that process, as all that happened, you started to see kind of the new EAA, or the next iteration of the EAA, come to the forefront. And that led to the idea that we need to recreate, you could say rebrand, our image based on what was happening. And so we arrived at the next logo image that we were going to use to face the public. And so the logo that we arrived at was very educational in nature. Yeah. It kind of depicted the rain cycle and the natural cycle of how the Edwards Aquifer works, which was appropriate for the time because we were trying to educate the public on not just what we do, but why do we need an HCP? What does that all mean? And you get the gist of what an HCP does by understanding how the system works. Why are we protecting species that live in these two spring systems? What does that mean for those that live in the artesian zone to the west that have nothing to do with species on a day-to-day basis, except that their water use could impact that? And then we're all dependent on the natural water cycle bringing us rain or not bringing us rain. And the HCP was designed to help us manage through those times when we don't get rain. And so that logo did that. It started to tell that story. It had a very environmental feel to it, ecological feel to it. And fast forward to where we are today. Since then, we're almost at the end of the current HCP term. That was a 15-year permit, and we're working on the next one. We've been quite successful with that HCP. And as a result of that, as we got settled into that and our regulatory programs kind of settled into kind of routine operation and people began to really understand what we're all about, this idea of what's the next iteration of our vision of our mission going to look like. And we started talking about something that we call next generation. The next generation of our mission, we started focusing more on what we do up in the recharge zone and in the contributing zone up in the watershed to the system. So much of our early years was focused on the outflows from the system and managing that and making sure that we had enough outflows to comply with our obligations to the federal government under our incidental take permit through the HCP. And so we got to a place of unprecedented stability and certainty. And that opened up the possibilities for us to imagine new things, new ways, be more inclusive of people in the mission. And we landed on next generation. And that's all focused on in doing everything we can to ensure that the Edwards remains sustainable for the next generation or generations, and that we do all that in ways that are credible and that achieve even greater certainty for the region. So we've gone, kind of the evolution of the mission has been, in the early days, was very concrete. You manage withdrawals from the aquifer. That was the focal point. You regulate use of the Edwards. And then we started to kind of get our arms around that and got that in place. And we shifted to, okay, we need an HCP. We've got to control, make sure we have enough spring flows coming from that, because that answered, ultimately, that was the issue that created us. Mm-hmm. Can you manage this Edwards Aquifer in a way that ensures that you're complying with the Endangered Species Act? Because that's the vehicle that was used to hold us accountable, hold the state of Texas accountable. And so we went from those, what I would call mandatory type of directives, to now a place where we could imagine a new future ourselves. We could take control of our future more than we ever could in the past. And we started thinking about, if we can take control of our future, where is it that we'll focus? And we'll focus on not more regulation, but more collaboration, more partnership. And so we started working in earnest with other partners, like the city of San Antonio. We work with them in their conservation easement program to make sure that lands that are enrolled in that program, which are designed to protect the Edwards Aquifer, that program would continue in the future. And we started looking at ways that we might be able to supplement that program. And so we've undertaken that effort to identify more lands for conservation easement. We're focused on how we can better partner with the people that we do regulate and control the water rights from the Edwards. We've incentivized conservation, I think, to a great degree beyond what maybe folks could have envisioned at one point. We now have programs within the HCP that are taking water off the table when it's the worst drought conditions, and those programs have proven to work. And so all that has been happening, and it's kind of created this confluence of ideas and good work. And so we're now at a place where, as we're envisioning the future, the thought was we're probably ripe for a rebrand of our work. What is it? How can we communicate what it is that we do? More importantly, the vision of what we see that we're going to be in the future to the region. And so we end up with this idea that we can rebrand ourselves in a way that is not just as a regulatory agency, but something much more, as a resource, as a collaborator, as a partner, someone that's inclusive, that's imaginative, that's innovative. Those are words that aren't usually assigned to public agencies like ours, but that's what we're striving for, and that's kind of been what we've been working through. And so we end up with a new logo design that we just took to the board recently for their final approval, and it's more of a it's esoteric. It's more speaks more to an open-ended, imaginative way of thinking of ourselves, and not a very black and white view of ourselves, but something that kind of, it's intended to open the imagination and think in ways that are a little more infinite in creativity. So that's how we got to where we are. Very basic to much more sophisticated. That's been the journey.
Yeah, Roland, that was a great description of the reasons behind the changing our logo over time and our branding. It's not that our mission has changed, it's that it's evolved over time and started simple with that simple logo and now going into the next generation with more complexity of what we want to do for the region.
Right.
So now that we've addressed, some of the reasons behind the logo, we want to talk about some of the science of logos and how we came to get this logo. I mean, if you look at logos, they're meant to be recognizable instantly. You're meant to instantly recognize what organization or what company that is, and that's kind of what we were going for. So now we're going to transition to Mike de la Garza. He's, again, the Executive Director of our communications team, tasked with starting out this whole process. So, Mike, now that Roland explained why we wanted to change the logo and do this rebranding, what sort of vision or how did you come about with this project?
When you think about a logo, when you think about a successful brand, you're always thinking about the power and the viability, the credibility, the sustainability of an organization. And certainly the Edwards Aquifer Authority has been that really from the get-go. Now, the first years of this organization were rather rocky. We were members of the Lawsuit of the Month Club. There were attempts to basically put this out of existence. And it took a few years to get to the point where this organization was safe enough to consider possibilities. And one of the possibilities, as Roland has mentioned, is the Habitat Conservation Plan that really elevated the game of the Edwards Aquifer Authority. Now, to be sure, what I've found since I've arrived here at the EAA, what I found fascinating was that even before we knew we were going to use it, we collected data and we just did it and we collected it. We had no sense of what it would be used for, nor was there, quote unquote, a mandate of any significance to collect that, but we did. And thank God we did, because it basically preceded a whole advent of scientific management that has become really one of the pillars of the Edwards Aquifer Authority. And so this organization's always been one that looks towards the future, and it always looks for conversations that have possibilities. A lot of times people get into a conversation that's a dead end or has nowhere to go. And so when you're putting together a logo for an organization like the Edwards Aquifer Authority, knowing what its history has been, knowing what its vision has been, you're always looking for that kind of impression that leaves it open for conversations. And in that sense and in that realm, working with our creative manager at Flores, we had conversations about what does a logo like that look like? What is it? What do you put up on the mantle and say, these are the next 25 years of the Edwards Aquifer Authority? And certainly the design that was used and is incorporated in the currently approved logo is symbolism that indicates a never-ending quest, always moving, always fluidic effort. And that effort for us is not only our regulatory role, which has always been there and always will be there, but it's the quest for scientific knowledge. It's the quest for customer service that goes beyond gotchas, but the willingness to work with our customers and figure out opportunities, possibilities. And so the logo that we've designed is certainly one that calls upon those notions in a very symbolic way. And Brent mentioned this earlier. He's right. A logo has, occasionally it has about 1/10 of a second to make an impression. And it's got to make that impression and lead people to either want to learn more about it or and remember it and pursue it with further opportunities. And this organization, to be sure, as Roland has mentioned, we are pursuing our second habitat conservation plan. We've also just recently opened up our first education outreach center. That created the possibility for the field research park nearby. So this organization is always engaged in never-ending quest for possibilities. And I think those two programs are just indicative of the kinds of opportunities that are available for us moving forward. And so the logo, as Ed will explain, is one that really is the basis for optimism, for the approach that builds upon the previous EEA. And to be sure, we're not changing the mission of the EEA. We never have. Consider the new logo like a cover on a book. We're changing. As we add chapters to this book called the EEA, we have created a new jacket, if you will, for the book itself. And it's meant to spur recognition. It's meant to spur a conversation. It's meant to encourage interaction. And ultimately, it's meant to increase the awareness and insights into the EEA and ultimately the Edwards Aquifer.
Yes, thank you so much, Mike, for sharing. And when you and Roland were speaking, it made me think of the first logo very much looks regulatory. It looks like a regulatory agency would produce something like that. And then the second iteration of the logo does look more scientific, obviously, because it's trying to give a description of the water cycle and teach people very intricately about the different parts of the different parts of the Edwards Aquifer system. And when you think about the new logo, I think evolution, next generations, there's always going to be generations that come after us, and they're always going to be ever evolving. So Ed, as the creative manager, how did you take this vision that Roland and Mike kind of came up with, and how did you come upon the concept and final design for the new logo?
That's a great question. First of all, you heard Roland say a lot of good points. So did Mike. That became my palette. So how do you take all the stuff that they have said and bring it to one symbol? That's the hard thing about a logo. But that's what intrigues me about a logo. I've designed a lot of stuff, posters, commercials, but a logo intrigues me because you got to say a lot with one mark. Mm-hmm. The logo represents your brand. It is not the brand. As Roland just said, we're embarking on a new horizon, I would think. And when we were brainstorming, we said, what word resonates with me or resonates with us? And as we thought about it, we kept thinking, when we collaborate internally or externally, the possibilities are endless. So we wrote the word endless. Okay. We said, if you think about it, the water cycle is also endless. It's a continuous thing. It rains, comes through 3 things, and then goes up again and repeats again. It's an endless process. But what intrigued me, so again, the word endless, infinite, came to mind. So we wrote it down. That's the way we work. One thing that intrigued me was that we have a lot of science behind what we do. We just don't manage, enhance, and protect just to do it. We do it based on science. And we do it based on research. And we do it based on, and we do it based on, research. And we do it based on, 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 and we do that in itself is an endless process. You get to a solution and you say, you know what? Let's try it one more time, see if there's a better solution. So it's an endless process. So the word that resonated was infinite. So I sat down and said, okay, what symbol is out there that says infinite? Infinity. If you look at our logo closely, there's an infinity symbol in there. Now, there's something I can sink my teeth into and build a message around. Endless possibilities to collaborate with entities outside the Edwards Aquifer. Stakeholders, federal regulators, educators. There's an endless possibility. So that really, really, really drove the logo. A logo by itself doesn't tell the whole brand, but it's easier to build a brand around a logo that has content, a concept behind it. And that was the whole intent. We brought 2 designers outside that I had worked with before, simply because to design something that you're too close to, it's very, very difficult. You want a fresh eyes. I worked with one guy named Corey Matthews. We worked on the Army account. He's very analytical. Then I came across this designer in Facebook that I just saw. I said, man, this guy's out there. So we brought a strategic thinker and a designer who's out there and said, come in here and talk to us. We gave him everything that we had. Here's where we're going. Here's what we do. We kept coming back to the infinity symbol. And I remember making the presentation to the staff here. And I think Brent was one of the people who said, there's an infinity symbol there. That's when I said, I've got something here. Mm-hmm. Hamilton, a scientist, also said, there's an infinity symbol in here. So, okay, now we got really, really juicy stuff here, right? Now we can build a brand around this infinite possibilities, infinite collaboration. It's just a logo that it was a happy accident. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the best things that happen in creativity is by accident. I mean, you wake up one morning and go like, what about this? Yeah. The creative process is a very difficult process to explain. Mm-hmm. People say, how do you come up with ideas? How do you write a song? You know, it's the creative process is a very difficult process. What I do as a designer, I sit down with people like Roland and Mike, Brent, all the scientists, say, tell me about your company. That fits my brain. Once I fit my brain, creativity kicks in. Mm-hmm. Without content, it's just a logo. I could have done a water drop. I could have done anything, but I told Mike, this logo has to stand and separate itself from the competition. A logo has to separate you from the competition. I think this does it. Not because I designed it, but because it's a collaboration. In fact, there's the word collaboration. Corey, Josh, my team, and I, and Mike, and everybody had something to do with this thing. It's a collaborative effort. And I think when you collaborate, coming back again, infinite possibilities. And the logo says it.
I realize since we're on a podcast, an audio medium for many readers, can you just describe what the logo looks like and what?
Okay, yeah. It's kind of difficult to
do that.
to describe a visual or audio. The infinite symbol has, I mentioned the infinite symbol, right? We have only 2 loops. Well, we have 3 letters, the E, A, and A. So the objective was to get the infinity symbol and put an E in front of it and marry the E to the infinity symbol without sacrificing the infinity symbol. So the infinity symbol had to replicate the A and the A of Edwards Aquifer. So what we did was marry the E with the infinity symbol. It's very difficult to explain something visually when you're trying to do it when it's visual.
But there is one thing I would add that you made a point to make a part of the design, and that is our previous logo had the E, the A, and the A separate from each other. And what you did with the infinity logo, with the infinity symbol, is that you connected the 3 letters of the EAA that are now together and unified, which I think, again, underscores our intent to be collaborative and not necessarily work in silos or isolated from the community or anything of that nature.
Right.
So I think that is also a powerful reminder in the logo that you created, was that everyone works together for a common cause.
You know, Brent, as I was saying, the logo has a lot of content. Mike just hit upon something else that we wanted to do. The old logo were 3 letters separated. Well, we don't work in silos. We collaborate. So the logo had to be connected. The color scheme was blue and green. Blue, water. Green, nature. Nature will not exist without water, grass, trees. That's another thing. The color palette had to be in the greens and the blues spectrum. Coming back to the infinity symbol, it's got movement. If you look at it, it moves. It's not static. Water moves. It flows. So there's, again, one more time, there's a lot of content built into the logo. There's a lot of rationale of why we did this. We didn't do this just to do it. Water movement, infinity symbol, color choice, typography, all come to play to create this logo.
And for the record, I think it's a beautiful logo. I really like it. I really like what y'all did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward
It's
to
a group effort.
sharing it.
And when you talk about infinite possibilities, I also think like infinite things to be discovered about the aquifer, because the aquifer science component of the things that we do and the research that goes on, I'm just blown away by some of the things that I hear from Mark Hamilton and the scholarly research that they do on their teams. And I also think it speaks to the evolution of our agency. There's so many great things, like Mike mentioned, the Education Outreach Center and then the Field Research Park. There's so many things that I think a lot of people who have been here for a long time didn't think were possible. And it just has opened the doors and kind of broadened the horizons of everyone here. And I feel like it's reinvigorated a lot of people that work here. And then the younger generations that are looking to work at the EAA, which I know is a sought after place to work at, I think it brings them here and it makes them want to be a part of something.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. I think that, not to overstate the role of the logo, but what Ed was talking about is, I think he was trying to find something that captured the essence of who we are and what we want to be. And it's changed from what we once were, to your point. Now, I catch myself making reference to the old days, the EAA pre-2010, so to speak, or something like that. And I realize that more and more there aren't many people here that were around at that time. And so sometimes I need to catch myself that I'm not talking in a vacuum, and it's irrelevant. So the logo is a good reminder for me that we're in a new era, we're in a new place, we're charting new water, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And so it's exciting because it repositions us, at least in our minds, about what we are and what we do, even though we're still doing the same things that we've always done. We're just thinking about them in more creative ways. We're thinking outside the box more, and we're still going to manage, enhance, and protect. But we've broadened the toolbox of the tools available to us to do that. And one of them is like through the education programming, through some of the scientific programming and land management opportunities and all that. Those are things that I think always were there for us to do, but there was a place and time in the past where we would have been hard-pressed to do it because our minds were so preoccupied with just the basic foundational elements of getting a regulatory agency off the ground, up and running, with some sense of credible sustainability for the long term. And now we're there. I think, honestly, not to overstate it, but I think that the community and the region at large, the state, would be hard-pressed to imagine a world without the work of the EAA. And we see it every legislative session when we try to be available to inform and educate policymakers. They seek us out oftentimes to be the resource to their decision-making process. How do y'all do it in the Edwards? What have y'all learned doing it that way? And there's a whole podcast you could devote to the whys and why nots of how groundwater is managed in the state of Texas. But in the Edwards region, the way that it's done is, I would say it's the right way. maybe not the right way for everyone across the state, but certainly for us, the solutions we've arrived at, they've worked. They've worked through these droughts. We're in the middle of a drought now. We had a drought in 2011 to 2014. It sustained spring flows. And so it gives us a level of confidence, I think, too, that we can rebrand ourselves with some level of confidence and certainty that, we're not just putting lipstick on a pig, as the saying goes. We did the hard work first with building ourselves from the inside out, and now because we've been successful, well, let's tell the story of how we've been successful. And one of the ways to do it, a beginning point, is with a new look logo that helps us continue to tell the story.
There you have it. The right time, the right place, and the right vision. So thank you all for joining us, and Mike, Roland, and Ed for sharing the rebranding process and everything that goes into that.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Recharge Zone podcast. Have questions, ideas for topics, or things you would like to share with us? Well, reach out to us by emailing us at rechargezone@edwardsaquifer.org.